My name is Jack Morgan. I am 38 years old and serve as a captain in the United States Marine Corps. Afghanistan had been my second home for months, a place where fear was routine and silence meant safety. That night, the desert was quiet, the kind of stillness that presses against your chest. I was sitting on my cot, half awake, when my satellite phone vibrated. The screen showed a name I hadn't seen in weeks. Rebecca, my ex-wife. My pulse picked up even before I answered, because she never called unless something was wrong. Her voice was trembling, the kind of whisper you use when you're hiding from something. She said my name once, then the words that froze me, "Get our daughter out of your parents' house, right now." At first, I thought she was delirious or drunk or having one of her panic spells. Then she said she had received a message, an image she couldn't ignore. It showed Ethan, my younger brother, standing in the hallway outside our little girl's room, his face half-lit by the nightlight. The timestamp was only 3 hours old. Something in her tone made my skin crawl. Rebecca wasn't the type to exaggerate. She worked in law enforcement, trained to stay calm, and I could hear the fear in every pause between her words. She said she had tried calling the house, but no one answered. She said she didn't trust the local cops because our family name carried too much weight in that town. My parents had friends in the department, and she didn't want this swept under the rug. Then the call cut off, a dead line that left me staring into the dark. I sat there, holding the phone, listening to the sound of my own breathing through the static of the night. My mind went through every possibility, trying to make sense of what she had said. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Ethan was checking on the girl. But deep down, I knew something was off. I had seen that look in his eyes before, a kind of hunger that made me uneasy but that I'd learned to ignore because he was family. Now, all I could think about was my daughter asleep in that house and my brother outside her door. In the Marines, I had learned to move without hesitation. Orders came, and you acted. But this wasn't a command. This was a choice, and the cost of waiting could be unbearable. I threw on my gear, boots half-laced, heart pounding harder with every second. The air outside was cold and thin. Every instinct in me screamed that something was about to break. I didn't know how I was going to get home from a war zone in time, or what I would find when I did. All I knew was that I couldn't stay here, not one more night. For years, I had faced enemy fire, explosions, and ambushes. None of that compared to the fear that took hold of me that night. It wasn't the fear of dying. It was the fear of losing the one thing that made my life mean something. That whisper from Rebecca wasn't just a warning. It was a call for me to come home, not as a soldier, but as a father who had already lost too much. Getting out of Afghanistan in less than 24 hours wasn't just difficult, it was borderline impossible. I pulled every string I had, lied about a death in the family, and called in favors that might haunt me for years. They didn't ask too many questions. When you've served 4 tours and kept your mouth shut, people tend to let things slide. But I knew I was risking my career, possibly worse. I didn't care. Something about Rebecca's voice had stripped away all sense of protocol. By the time my boots hit American soil, my mind was already 10 steps ahead. I'd planned the drive from the base to my hometown like an op. No calls, no stops, just keep moving. As I turned into the long driveway that led to the family estate, the sense of dread only grew heavier. The Morgan house stood like a fortress, perfectly manicured, lights glowing in all the right windows. From the outside, it looked safe, but the silence felt off. Not the peaceful kind, the kind before a storm. I parked near the garage and stepped out. Gravel crunched underfoot, my breath fogged in the cool air. Every window was lit like a museum. Curtains pulled back just enough to let the world see our perfection. It was too quiet. No TV murmurs, no laughter, no footsteps. The door opened before I could knock. My father stood there in a crisp button-down, his smile tight, eyes scanning me like I was an intruder. He said they hadn't expected me. I told him plans changed. Walking through that house felt like stepping into a memory that didn't belong to me anymore. The hardwood floors gleamed. The smell of lemon polish and fireplace lingered in the air. My mother appeared from the kitchen, apron spotless, voice a practiced cheerfulness that didn't match the tension in her eyes. She asked how long I was staying. I told her just enough to see Anna. That name made her flinch. They didn't ask why I was back so suddenly. They didn't need to. They knew something. Each room I passed looked exactly as I remembered. Yet something had shifted, like someone had moved the furniture an inch off center, just enough to be wrong. My boots echoed down the hallway as I made my way toward the guest room where Anna was supposed to be sleeping. The walls were covered with family portraits, smiling faces, uniforms, trophies. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the smiles were masks. That this house, my home, had turned into something else while I was gone. Something colder, something dangerous. It's strange how the mind replays moments you didn't think mattered. Back then, I saw things and brushed them off. Now, they hit me like warning signs I chose to ignore. There was a weekend just before I left for my last deployment. I came home to surprise Anna, and Ethan was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside her, helping her with a puzzle. She was giggling, eyes lit up the way they always were when she saw me. But what I noticed, and didn't admit at the time, was how Ethan didn't even look up when I walked in. I remember Anna jumping up and running to me, arms wide. She called out, "Daddy." Ethan's head finally turned, and there was this pause, this flicker of something in his eyes. Not joy, not warmth. It was subtle, but it stayed with me. A tightness in his jaw, the way his hands curled into fists for a second, then loosened. I told myself I imagined it, that it was just stress or whatever he was dealing with. But now I see it for what it was, jealousy, pure and simple. There were more things. He always insisted on tucking her in, even when I was home. Said she liked how he read bedtime stories. He'd sit too close on the couch, leaning in just a little more than normal. I noticed once how he brushed her hair back behind her ear, gently, like he had some right. Another time, I found a sketch pad in his room. Ethan used to draw. There was a page with Anna's face soft, detailed, too detailed. At the time, I thought he was just a proud uncle. Maybe he missed her. Maybe he saw her like a muse or something innocent. But when I look back, all those little pieces fall into place. The intensity in his eyes when she laughed. The way he corrected her when she mispronounced his name. He always wanted her to say Uncle Ethan, not just Ethan. I thought he was being silly. Now I wonder if it was about control. I wonder how I missed it all. And worse, I wonder how long he's been waiting for me to leave. Rebecca met me at a diner just off the highway, the kind of place we used to stop at before court hearings when we still tried to act civil. She sat in a booth by the window, coat still on, hands clenched around a coffee cup she hadn't touched. When I slid in across from her, she didn't even look up right away. I saw it in her face before she said a word. Fear, not panic, not nerves. Something deeper. A kind of fear that doesn't let you sleep. I asked her again why she hadn't just gone through her department. Why not call a judge, push for an order, anything? She stared out the window like she was trying to keep herself from crying. Then she told me. Her captain shut her down the moment she brought up Ethan. Said it was a family matter. She found out later he plays golf with our father. When she tried to file something unofficial, it disappeared. She even tried bypassing her own department, but no one would touch it. Not with the Morgan name attached. She reached into her bag and slid her phone across the table. The screen lit up with a message. No sender, just a photo. Ethan, standing outside Anna's door again. A timestamp from 2 nights ago. And underneath it, a text. If you speak, she's gone. Rebecca's voice cracked when she told me she believed it. That it wasn't just a threat to scare her. It was real. She had seen enough cases to know the kind of people who send messages like that usually mean it. I asked why she didn't take Anna herself, run, disappear. She shook her head, said that would only make things worse. She was being watched, her car followed, her locker at work rifled through. Someone wanted her to stay scared and stay quiet. She said she couldn't trust anyone, not the system, not her boss, not even the court. That's when she looked at me, really looked. And I saw it. She hated that it had come to this. Hated that she had to ask me, of all people, to do something the law was supposed to handle. I told her I didn't know what she expected from me. She said she didn't expect anything. Just hoped I'd still fight for our daughter, the way I used to fight for everything that mattered. That broke me a little, because she was right. The law wasn't going to save Anna. It would hide behind red tape and reputations until it was too late. So it was on me now, not as a Marine, not even as a father, just as someone who finally saw what had been there all along and couldn't look away anymore. Ethan's room smelled like dust and old paper, too tidy for someone who never cared much about order. I closed the door behind me and stood still, letting my ears adjust to the silence. No footsteps outside, no voices, just my own breath, slow and shallow. I scanned the space, letting muscle memory take over. Something didn't feel right. Not on the surface, but in the structure, the way the air moved beneath my feet. I stepped closer to the far side of the room, the corner near his bookshelf. My heel clicked just slightly louder there. A hollow note, subtle. If I hadn't spent years clearing buildings and listening for pressure plates, I might have missed it. I crouched and pressed my palm to the floorboards. One section flexed a little too easily under my hand. The wood looked untouched, but there was something off about the alignment. Like someone had tried too hard to make it look perfect. I pulled out my knife and slid the tip along the seam. A faint click, then the board lifted. Beneath it, wrapped in an old flannel shirt, was a wooden box with a brass clasp. Nothing fancy, just big enough to hold something small and important. My fingers hesitated for half a second before I opened it. Inside, a flash drive sat between two Polaroids. I picked them up one at a time, hands trembling harder than I wanted to admit. The first was Anna, asleep. In her pajamas, face peaceful. But the angle of the shot was wrong. It wasn't a parent checking in. It was someone hovering, someone watching her through the crack of a barely opened door. The second photo showed two other girls, both younger. Neither one familiar. One had a bruise near her eye. The other was tied at the wrist with ribbon. I didn't need to see more. My stomach turned, and my vision narrowed like I was under fire again. I plugged the flash drive into Ethan's laptop. More pictures, folders labeled with numbers, videos. I didn't open any. I didn't need to. The truth was already louder than anything I'd ever heard. I stood up slowly, heart pounding like a war drum. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was cold, exact, surgical, like the switch had flipped. There was no calling the cops. No waiting. Whatever line I hadn't crossed yet, I crossed it the moment I saw my daughter's face on that screen. The walls felt tighter with every step I took. I moved through the hall like I was clearing a combat zone. The floor creaked in patterns that didn't match the house I grew up in. That's how I found it. A faint scrape along the baseboard near the back pantry. A section of the wall that had been painted a shade too clean. I pressed against it, and the panel shifted. A metal latch clicked behind the drywall, and a small door opened inward, revealing a narrow stairwell leading into darkness. The air changed the moment I stepped through. It was colder, heavier, the kind of air that doesn't move. My boots landed on concrete, and I kept low, flashlight drawn, pulse hammering in my neck. The basement was deeper than it should have been. At the end of the corridor, I found another door. This one was reinforced. I pulled it open slowly, expecting storage or tools. What I saw made my throat close. Two girls sat huddled on the floor, backs against the far wall, blankets wrapped around them. One lifted her head. Her eyes were swollen from crying. The other flinched at the light. Neither spoke. There was a mattress on the ground, a camera on a tripod, and a tray of half-eaten food. I reached for my phone and dialed. My fingers were shaking, but I got the first number pressed. Then I heard it, a whisper behind me. She was supposed to be mine. Ethan's voice, right behind my ear. I turned, but he was already moving. He came out of the shadows like he belonged in them, eyes wide and bloodshot, lips curled into a smile that made my skin crawl. His fist connected with my jaw before I could raise my arm. I hit the wall hard but stayed up. I'd taken worse in combat. But this wasn't war. This was personal. He lunged again, screaming now, words I couldn't make out. I slammed him into the shelves, grabbed his shirt, and drove him to the floor. We wrestled in the dark, feet knocking over cans, fists hitting whatever they could. He bit down on my shoulder, and I saw red. I slammed my elbow into his neck and rolled off him, gasping. He tried to crawl toward the girls. I grabbed his ankle and pulled him back. That's when the sirens started. Rebecca must have followed her gut and called them anyway. I didn't stop to thank her. I pressed my knee into Ethan's back until the cops burst in, guns raised, eyes wide at what they saw. I stood slowly, hands up, and pointed to the corner. That's him. That's what he is. And I hope you never let him out. They arrived just minutes after the sirens stopped. My parents. My mother ran toward Ethan like she didn't see the cuffs on his wrists. She screamed at the officers, calling it a mistake, demanding to see a warrant. My father stood behind her, jaw tight, eyes locked on me like I'd betrayed something sacred. He didn't ask if the girls were okay. He didn't ask what Ethan had done. He just asked me one question. Why would you do this to your brother? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words would have come out as fire. Rebecca stood beside me, arms crossed, shaking from the cold and the weight of what had just happened. My father turned on her next. Said she manipulated me. Said she was jealous of how close Ethan was to Anna. Then he looked at the officers again and told them it was a family matter, that it didn't need to go this far. But they didn't back down. Not this time. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I stayed in a motel just outside town, kept Anna close. She didn't speak much, just held onto my arm when she slept. On the third day, a letter came. No return address, but I recognized my father's handwriting. I opened it slowly, already bracing for the blow. Inside were 5 lines, neat, cold, final. He wrote that they had known about Ethan for years, that there had been signs as early as middle school. A teacher had raised concerns. A counselor had warned them, but they didn't want the shame. He wrote that they believed they could fix it quietly, that keeping it within the family was the right thing, that no one else needed to know, that it was better for everyone if they handled it their way. The last line was written in darker ink, like he pressed harder when he signed it. You destroyed this family. I read it twice, then again. The weight of those words didn't land all at once. It came in waves. The idea that they knew, that they chose silence over safety, that they let Ethan grow into something monstrous because they feared losing status more than losing children. I wanted to scream, but there was no one to hear it. I wanted to tear the letter, but I couldn't move. In that moment, I understood. My parents didn't just fail Ethan. They failed me. They failed every girl whose name they never bothered to learn. And now, they were mourning a lie instead of confronting the truth. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and threw it into the motel trash. Some families die quietly. Ours died the day silence mattered more than justice. I carried Anna out of that house without looking back. She was asleep in my arms, her head resting against my shoulder like nothing had happened. The sky was just starting to lighten, soft gray spreading across the trees. It felt like the end of something, but not the kind that breaks you, the kind that sets you free. I had no brother anymore, no parents, no place in the family name that used to mean everything in this town. But none of that mattered. Not when I felt the weight of my daughter breathing steady and safe against my chest. I didn't save a reputation. I didn't save a legacy. I saved a child. We didn't talk as we drove away. She kept her hand wrapped around my thumb, and that was enough. I didn't know where we were going, or what came next, but I knew one thing for certain. I'd do it all again. Every lie, every fight, every risk. Because sometimes, the only thing worth holding on to is what everyone else was too afraid to protect.